From WCI3 Plus, with your host, Kevin Lighty, this is Behind the Forecast.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for jumping back in here with us. It is another edition of Behind the Forecast. That's my name right there. I'm Kevin Lighty, Chief Meteorologist here at WCIA. Here we go. Let's rock and roll. Let's get to video number one, our viral videos of the week. This is going to be our top five. Number five, how about the old Dust Devil showing up down here into portions of Utah. That's right, Salt Lake City. Dust Devil, obviously different from a tornado. Just picking up dust, not associated with a thunderstorm, but always interesting to see one of those. I'm not going to lie. I've always wanted to run through a Dust Devil. I don't know that that's a good idea, but I've wanted to. I chase tornadoes, so I'm already living on the edge, right? All right, video number four. This is going to be flooding in Alaska. But what's interesting, it's floodwaters released by the Mendenhall Glacier, okay? A river that flows through Alaska's capital there, Juneau. They're talking about some flooding that's occurred, streets and some areas there underwater, some riverfront homes as well. The Mendenhall Glacier is about 12 miles from Juneau, home to 30,000 people, popular tourist attraction. I was fortunate enough myself to actually visit the Mendenhall Glacier and down there. So some flooding in Alaska, in the capital city. All right, let's go on to our video number three. Here it is. More flooding. But this one in Milwaukee. They got severe weather and flooding. This is from a river that spilled out there. Now, what you're looking at are people at the Wisconsin State Fair. They had to cancel the Lynyrd Skynyrd concert, the main stage, due to the severe weather down there. So people that were walking around there, obviously not expecting that. They're just trying to go to a concert, right? So lots of heavy rainfall that they experienced up in the Milwaukee area during this past week. All right, let's go to video number two for the week, and that is going to be 3I Atlas. What is that, you may say? Well, it's a new interstellar object in our solar system. That is at least one expert asking whether it's evidence of alien life. NASA and the European Space Agency released these images of the object, which was discovered last month passing by Earth at 130,000 miles an hour. But the former chair of Harvard's astronomy department isn't convinced it's a comet. Professor suggests it could be, wait for it, alien life. It's possible. Who knows? You never know with these things. But the latest on what could be mysterious, non-comet kind of things going on. You never know. Cue the Unsolved Mysteries music. Da-da-da, da-da-da, right? All right, number one. Here we go. Check this out. All right, let's run it back here. I want you to see this from the beginning. Here we go. Lightning strike. Boom. That thing hit a transformer, blowing the transformer. That was actually located down in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Look at that. The sparks flying there. And so the lightning strikes that. Transformer blows. You get this big, huge fire plume. Man, pretty wild stuff there as they had some thunderstorms. What's interesting is, even here locally, we had something happen here this week in Decatur. We had an individual that also had caught on his dash cam, just like this person did, of lightning hitting a pole over there near Decatur with those storms. So pretty wild stuff that we've had here as of late. Okay, guys, those are our top five viral weather videos of the week. Coming up, we're going to shift gears a bit. So hurricane season is upon us. It's been a pretty quiet one here so far. And I know that as we live here in the Midwest, we don't really think a whole lot about hurricanes, but we sometimes can get some of the impacts after the hurricane hits land and then comes up. And we've had our fair share of events here with heavy rainfall, even sometimes tornadoes that can spin up along some of the outer bands from what is left from that hurricane, usually weakening to tropical storm or tropical depression status. We're actually going to talk to a meteorologist who works at the Lake Charles National Weather Service. It is meteorologist Doug Cramer. We're going to pick his brain about the upcoming hurricane season, what we think or what he thinks we're going to have here, and just what kind of impacts that we could see in it. Also, a 20-year anniversary to a very famous hurricane. We'll ask him about that. That's coming up on Behind the Forecast. Welcome back to another edition of Behind the Forecast. I'm WCA3 Chief Meteorologist Kevin Lighty, and so happy to have you back here with us once again. And we are about to talk to someone that has a lot of knowledge about a very timely topic: hurricanes and hurricane season that is getting into full swing here coming up. And this is the segment of the show where we like to talk to people about how weather affects their jobs and, get a little bit more behind the scenes, a little bit longer form access into talking about things going on in the weather world. And so we are going to go down to the Gulf. As we all know, we don't exactly get, full-blown hurricanes up here in central Illinois. We can see some of the remnants of that, but some areas down to the south along the Gulf Coast, they get hit hard by hurricanes every single year, and they're about to go into their busiest part of the season. So we go down to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we bring in meteorologist Doug Cramer with the National Weather Service down in Lake Charles. He's the warning coordination meteorologist down there. And Doug, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin.
All right, Doug, so you are down there along the Gulf Coast. You guys get a lot of action down that way, those warm, moist waters and whatnot. I think what a lot of people are kind of wondering about, up to this point, we haven't had a lot of activity down in the Gulf here this season, or even in the Atlantic. Is that going to continue? What are we looking at here as far as the upcoming hurricane season? What are you guys expecting down that way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. We don't think that this quiet activity is going to continue. As a matter of fact, we are expecting the tropical cyclone activity to increase, especially over about the next 2 weeks to about 5 weeks. There are some indications by some of the AI models that would indicate that we're about to become a lot more active out there.
So, with hurricanes obviously down that way, and you guys are no stranger to hurricanes coming out of the Gulf down there. What are some of the biggest things that, you look for? So here you are, we're into the second week of August here. Are you kind of looking at every storm? Like, what is it that you guys are kind of looking at there on a daily basis to try to kind of predict what may be happening in the coming weeks?
Yes, we are looking at every storm. So my particular area is Southeast Texas and then much of the Louisiana coastline. So any disturbance, any type of tropical depression or storm that forms out in the Atlantic Basin, the Caribbean, or the Gulf of Mexico, we're watching that very closely. We do have a storm out there right now that we're watching, and it does appear, thankfully, that it's going to develop, but then turn back out into the Atlantic. At least some of the initial indications, looking at some of the longer range forecasts, that would indicate that that will be the case and not have a whole lot of impact on us here in the United States.
So, every year they put out a forecast of here's how many hurricanes we think we're going to have. Here's how many tropical storms we think we're going to have. What's been going on with that number, with it fluctuating, and how do they come up with that forecast so far out in advance to try to determine how many they're going to be? What is it that they're able to look at in a long form forecast to come up with that kind of a forecast?
So there's a couple of different factors that come into play when it comes to those seasonal hurricane forecasts. Sea surface temperatures is one, and you're looking at those temperature anomalies in the Gulf, the Caribbean, and then also the Atlantic Basin are basically the origination points of our tropical cyclones. We know that the warmer the ocean temperatures, the more tropical cyclone activity we're typically going to have. And not only the more frequent tropical cyclone activity, but some of those hurricanes could be more intense the warmer those ocean waters are. So that comes into play. But then also the ENSO cycles. So there's three main ENSO cycles that we key in on. You've got La Nina, you've got El Nino, and then you've got ENSO neutral. Uh, this year, we are in an ENSO neutral phase. Last year, we were in La Nina. La Nina typically brings more tropical cyclone activity across the Atlantic, the Gulf, and the Caribbean. And indeed, it was a very busy year for us in the Gulf of America last year. 2 years ago, 2023 season, we were in El Nino. That typically brings more wind shear across the Caribbean and the Gulf of America. And that would tend to kind of protect us from having a whole lot of activity. And indeed, that's what happened in 2023. So those are the two main factors that we look at.
So, people are always, there's a lot of talk about, frequency, and are we getting more hurricanes? Is there an increase in that? What is it that you're seeing from your seat there, over the last 20 years? Are we seeing more hurricanes? Are we seeing more landfalls? If so, what is the, relation to why that's happening? What are the numbers looking like here?
Well, one of the more concerning statistics we've been following closely since about 2017, we've been averaging one category 4 or 5 landfall here in the United States per year. So I'll repeat that: one category 4 or 5 hurricane landfall in the United States per year. Prior to 2017, it was one every 7 years. And one of the more concerning issues that we're dealing with that may be increasing the frequency of those major hurricanes here in the United States is the chronic issue that we have with sea surface temperatures being well above normal in the Gulf, Caribbean, in the Atlantic Ocean. Since about 2017, that has been a chronic issue. And we're seeing the impacts from that with stronger hurricanes making landfall here in the United States.
So those warmer ocean waters that are happening, that are occurring down there. Talk a little bit about, again, up here in the Midwest, we're so used to tornadoes and whatnot, but hurricanes, they form in a different kind of way. Talk a little bit more about the evolution of hurricanes, what they're, the difference between kind of what creates a hurricane versus what creates a tornado that so many of us are used to down here.
Yeah, that's a completely different process. So it's kind of like a heat engine where you get a little bit of a low pressure system that forms out into the over some ocean temperatures that are really warm. And basically, you get this uplift in air that begins to happen, and it kind of feeds off of itself and creates kind of a heat engine effect over warm ocean temperatures. And that's why we don't get any hurricanes or tropical cyclones in the wintertime, the fall, or the spring, is because you really have to have those warm ocean temperatures. The other thing that you have to have is very little wind shear. So hurricanes, tropical cyclones that do not like wind shear. Wind shear would tend to tear those types of the systems apart. Now, when you're dealing with tornadoes, you want wind shear. Wind shear helps form those thunderstorms that are a little bit more organized and are capable of producing tornadoes. You got to have wind shear with tornadoes. You cannot have a whole lot of wind shear when it comes to tropical cyclones.
So when you do get hurricanes, and especially along the Gulf Coast regions, something that you guys deal with a lot more, but it's something that isn't as, I guess, what's the term? It doesn't get talked about as much as maybe it should. People think about the winds in a hurricane, but there's this whole thing called storm surge. Can you talk a little more about that and the impacts that has on Gulf Coast regions?
Yeah, storm surge has a lot of impact in Louisiana and Southeast Texas because our land has very little slope from the coastline through about I-10 and even points further north than I-10. So we're talking about 50, 60 miles off the coast where you may be only about 15 or 20 foot above sea level. And so, as you can imagine, when you get storm surge, it covers a lot of area. It can cover a tremendous amount of area, especially if you get a hurricane with a large eye diameter that could potentially be moving slow. Storm surge kills roughly 49-50% of people when it comes to tropical cyclones, more than freshwater flooding, tornadoes, or wind impacts. Storm surge can have a massive impact on infrastructure. It can remove homes off foundations. It can, storm surge with Hurricane Rita in 2005, it completely wiped out a little community called Holly Beach, which is right on the coast, Louisiana coast in southwest Louisiana, south of Lake Charles. So yeah, storm surge is the number one impact when it comes to tropical cyclones. Now, I will say, Kevin, freshwater flooding, the fatalities with that is increasing, and then because of Harvey, but also because of Helene last year. The freshwater flooding in southern Appalachia was terrible with Helene, as that system came up there. The remnants stalled over the southern Appalachians in East Tennessee and western North Carolina and destroyed entire communities, sections of interstates. That was just a terrible situation down there with 20 to 25 inches of rainfall there in that mountainous area. You and we spent time in the Missouri Ozarks with that kind of terrain, and we know what 2-3 inches of rapid rainfall can do in that terrain. Imagine 20 to 25 inches. That was some pretty terrible impact there.
And that's interesting to bring that up because, again, as people, a majority of our audience, obviously up here in Illinois, we have to worry about the remnants. We always use the remnants of hurricane whatever that eventually makes it up here, weakens from obviously when it made landfall, but talk a little bit more about some of the impacts that we, like you said, that you have inland, and that our folks here might experience some of the things that you look at when a hurricane makes landfall, but in the coming days makes its way up through the middle of Texas or Arkansas, then and up through Kentucky and into Illinois or Indiana. What are some of the things that we really have to look out for here locally when it comes to those hurricanes and their weakening stage, but when they get up here, still doing some things that we need to worry about?
Yeah, there are a lot of impacts when it comes to remnants of tropical cyclones. We've already talked about the freshwater flood impacts that can occur. You can get just incredible rainfall amounts inland with these systems, especially if they tend to kind of stall out. The other impact is strong winds. Some of these systems can be very efficient with wind and kind of carry some of that wind momentum well inland. I know in 2008 we had Gustav and Ike that came through the Missouri Ozarks when you and I were there, and we were getting 50, 60 mile per hour winds from the remnants of both Gustav and Ike back in 2008. And that created all kinds of damage across southern Missouri. But the other type of impact that you can get from extratropical cyclones or tornadoes. Last year, Hurricane Beryl, that made landfall in the morning, but as the remnants went up East Texas and Northwest Louisiana, we had a very efficient tornado outbreak with Beryl, numerous tornadoes in East Texas and Western Louisiana, and even up into parts of Arkansas. Hurricanes, while we talk about they don't do very well in wind shear, hurricanes actually do produce wind shear, especially kind of on the exterior parts of the storm. And that wind shear is very good at producing tornadoes. And I'm not just talking always weak tornadoes. Last year, we had a 14-mile long EF2 tornado in Jasper County, Texas, that went through the community of Jasper. And that did just incredible damage. So it was a good reminder that tornadoes can produce strong tornadoes.
It's kind of wild to think about. In about 2 weeks is the anniversary of one of the most devastating and infamous hurricanes of all time, Hurricane Katrina. Happened August 29th, 2005, the 20-year anniversary of that. You're down there in Louisiana. Is that something that a lot of people down that way still, talk about? And do they realize 20 years is coming up? And it probably seems like it hasn't been that long, but 20 years to Katrina. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, Katrina is talked about quite a bit, especially as you get closer to New Orleans, the other part of the state, is talked about quite a bit. The one hurricane that came in that same year that was devastating to Southwest Louisiana, where we're at, was Hurricane Rita. So that came in just a few weeks after Katrina, and that did all kinds of damage here in the Lake Charles area, and then also into Southeast Texas. And I think on this part of the state in Louisiana, that Rita tends to be more remembered than Katrina. But 2005, that was a pretty devastating year for the state of Louisiana.
Do you think that we're going to see more years ahead of us here where we get these multiple strong hurricanes and at landfall? Do you foresee that pattern continuing in the years looking forward?
Unfortunately, yes, with the sea surface temperatures being chronically above normal in the Gulf of America, Caribbean, and the Atlantic, that gives more window of opportunity for multiple major hurricanes to make landfall in the United States. Unfortunately, so I do believe it will happen again.
So far, again, we talked a little bit off the top there, but we've not seen a whole lot of activity. When is kind of the peak? When is kind of the peak where you see the most hurricane activity historically? Is there a time of the year when that is the case?
Yeah, so typically when you get into mid-September, that's when we see the highest frequency of tropical cyclone activity. We start to pick up in late July and especially into August, but peak activity would be mid-September. And then by the time we get to around Halloween, we really start to wind down, and then especially by Thanksgiving, those ocean temperatures become so cold that it gets really difficult to get a whole lot of tropical cyclone activity that late in the year.
I know a lot of people choose to not to evacuate sometimes when it comes to hurricanes, despite the warnings that the Weather Service is putting out and whatnot. Why is it that you think that some people decide to, we're just going to hunker down and ride it out?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hurricanes aren't very frequent when it comes to personalizing hurricanes, and that may be why, because you can live in on the coast for 20, 30 years, and you may not feel the impacts of a hurricane unless it hits you just right. So, that potentially could be a psychological factor why, but that's just really tough to say why anyone wouldn't want to evacuate. But I think that's kind of one of the things that I tend to hear the most right along the Gulf Coast and with some of our partners.
So what do you guys do from a messaging standpoint? I mean, and is that all you can do? Is just get the message out, and then people take their own personal, I guess, responsibility for themselves? Then are your hands just kind of tied? You make the forecast, you put the word out, and that's about all you can do, kind of thing. Is that kind of how you guys look
Yeah,
at it?
we follow the National Hurricane Center, so we are in constant coordination with NHC down in Miami, Florida. Anytime we get some type of system, by the time it gets into the Caribbean or maybe the Gulf of Mexico, that collaboration will happen 4 times a day, and then after that, that official forecast will come out and become public. And at that point, that's when we very heavily message that forecast and the potential impacts from any tropical cyclone that may impact southeast Texas or southwest Louisiana.
Believe it or not, Doug, we're running out of time here. Any last comments or anything you'd like to make about the upcoming hurricane season or anything else?
Yeah, I do want to throw in a piece. Hurricane forecasting is becoming more accurate. We've since Katrina and Rita, there have been several improvements to hurricane forecasting when it comes to creating ensembles and giving our partners probability of tropical storm force winds or hurricane force winds, and we're even giving them probability of storm surge heights. And these were all things that we weren't doing much back in 2005 when Katrina and Rita hit. Also, there's been about a 40% improvement with our hurricane models, with tracking them more accurately. And now, what's really exciting is that we're starting to incorporate artificial intelligence into our hurricane models. And I'm very optimistic that that's going to improve our forecasts even more, especially when it comes to rapid intensification and then really pinpointing and honing in on where these systems are going to make landfall.
Yeah, that's super interesting there. And you're right. If you look back 50 years ago in the forecast to what they are now, I mean, it is considerably better. And we definitely appreciate what all you guys do down there. That is for sure. Again, full disclosure, me and Doug used to work together. He mentioned a couple times down in Springfield, Missouri. He worked at the Weather Service office there, and when I worked in TV down there. And we've definitely covered our fair share of storms over the years. Isn't that right?
That is right. That's a lot of fun. I miss those days.
There you go. Me too, bud. All right. So here's the thing, guys. We are running out of time here. Doug, I really appreciate you jumping in here, talking to a little bit about hurricanes and the impacts there. I know that things are maybe about to get busier for you in the next few weeks and month or so to go. So definitely good luck to you guys down there in Southwest Louisiana.
Hey, let's do it again.
All right, thanks a lot. That right there is meteorologist Doug Cramer, Lake Charles area. Really appreciate him jumping in here with us. Okay, for me, though, that's another show. We wrap it up here and say goodbye to you tonight. Thanks for joining in for another edition of Behind the Forecast.